Today, we're going to start with a little bit of an overview over what's involved in senior studies, how it works at every school, so you have a sense of how these programs are put together, why JPC is a great destination for senior studies, and then we break down into the individual subjects. So today we're going to be talking about history, both modern and history integrated, commerce, which is both business and economics, legal studies, global studies, politics, and then some Q&A at the end. If you have any questions at any time, drop them into the chat and I'm happy to answer them. So, just in case you don't know, my name is Jason Paris. I've taught senior classes at 2 schools across 2 faculties since 2013. I've managed all 6 senior SOSE subjects at JPC from 2018. And in that time, I've taught 3 of the 6, which is business, modern history, and global studies. I've led the AST preparation for the college since 2018. And I've created exemplar assessment or packages for 2 courses, and 3 of our 6 courses have this distinction, which is recognition from external teachers. And I was also one of the 3 course writers for the new global studies course, which we'll talk about later. So happy to answer any question across any of these subjects. And if you want to talk about the difference between ACT and New South Wales, happy to do that as well. So the goal is a brief introduction, quick overview of the courses, and then Q&A, but we can integrate that throughout. So how does it all work? Regardless of whichever school you go to, every senior course starts off from a BSSS course document. The BSSS is the Board of Senior Secondary Studies. And from there, it gives direction and criteria for what each unit is. So for instance, I've got a photo here of the modern history one. We've got Understanding the Modern World, which is the 1st semester. Change in the 20th Century is the 2nd semester. Modern Nations is the 3rd semester. The Modern World since 1945 is the 4th semester, and Understanding Modern Nations is and these 2 are different electives that you can choose as well. So whichever college, they all start off from the same course document. And so teachers then use a mixture of staff expertise and student interest to customize these for the people that sit in our respective classes. All schools submit assignments and student work samples for moderation day to ensure that an assignment at school A is comparable to an assignment at school B. And in the AST is a 3-part test in term 3 of year 12. That basically allows schools to have a comparison yardstick so that it uses the school scores plus the AST to come up with your final ATAR, only for students who are tertiary. So that's for any school. JPC in particular, I'd encourage you all to stay at JPC. The reason is we know you as individuals, we know your strengths and the support that you need. You know the staff, and you know that we have highly qualified staff teaching all of our senior SOS subjects. With mentoring, you have a central go-to person who knows you and knows your family, and you get wonderful support through the house, through the LLWBs, through the APs and the principal. You have smaller class sizes and cohorts, which allows for more one-on-one and small group discussions. And because they're smaller class sizes, we have more scope to tailor topic selection to student interest during classes. We also have a mixture of independence and structure, which helps you outside of school. And the ILT allows you to gain one-on-one access from your teacher at set points during the study cycle. And if you're an accredited student, you have plenty of support for ASBAs and career pathways with Miss SOSE, who looks after careers. Obviously, there are plenty of reasons why we want you to stay at JPC. And here are our specific courses that we're offering for 2021-2022. The history pathway. We have 2 courses. We have modern history. Modern history looks at major events during the 20th century and their legacy. So we're talking about 1901 onwards. And history integrated is a combination of ancient history and pre-modern history units. So you do 2 ancient history units and 2 pre-modern history units, and that gives you the history integrated course. If you do both, you can gain a double major in history. And so if you're interested in there, the pathways are to history degrees, to heritage conservation, to museum exhibits, to archaeology. And obviously there are external links to international relations, political science, public policy, and legal studies. But specifically, when we look at modern history, it's a 4-semester course. The first semester that they're currently doing is colonization and the American Revolution. The second semester is decolonization and the USA civil rights movement. The third semester, which would be the semester that you start with, is called modern nations. And the fourth semester is the Middle East, peace and security. So these units can be run in any order. So the first and second units for next year are modern nations and Middle East, peace and security. And then for semester 1, year 12, you'll be doing colonization and the American Revolution, and then decolonization and the civil rights movement. When we contrast that to history integrated, they're currently doing the pre-modern history units this year, which is the Mongols and the Black Death and the Silk Road. So next year we start back with ancient history, and we'll alternate between ancient history and pre-modern history. We're looking at Athens, Sparta, and the Peloponnesian War, and in semester 1, and then the later Han and the Three Kingdoms in semester 2. So because there's varied student interest across ancient history and pre-modern history, it made sense to run these two courses together under the history integrated umbrella, which allows you to pick and choose. Now you can move from modern history to ancient history. You can move from modern history to history integrated. And as long as you do 4 semesters of history integrated or modern history, you still get your major in history. Does anyone have any, if you have any specific questions, again, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll come to them. Second one is commerce. Now commerce, we have 2 commerce courses. We have economics, which is how financial incentives and systems change human behavior and standards of living. And also business, which is the practical aspects of how businesses operate. If you do both, you can get a double major in commerce, and we'll break those down individually. Economics. So currently they are doing macroeconomics and globalization and development in semester 2. So you'll be starting in next year with economic principles, which is the price mechanism as well, looking at key concepts like supply and demand, 5-sector flow, 7-sector model, all of these concepts getting rolled together, which create the foundation of the study of economics. And then looking at market failure and the theory of the firm. So what causes market failure? What are the consequences? What can be done to avoid it? And then looking at the theory of the firm, which is more of a specialized area of economics. So there's your framework, 4 semesters of economics. Obviously, economics is generally for students who can combine the mathematical theory behind economics with the argument flow as well. Economics is is seen as a more complex course because it is very theory heavy, but we work hard to make sure that students can understand it. Economics is the only course in our offerings that is only offered at a tertiary level. So every other course can be done at either tertiary or accredited. Again, that's tertiary if you want to get an ATAR, accredited if you do not want to get an ATAR, you just want a Year 12 certificate. But economics is the only course that you cannot do at an accredited level. And then we look at business. Business is much more at the end point, looking at businesses that we know and engage with. We're currently in business. I'm the current business teacher. We're looking at the business plan and operations management. And next semester, we'll be looking at business challenges. So in semester 1 next year, we'll go back to changing business environment, which is all the factors that are affecting current businesses, like the pandemic, for instance, is a great case study, and how businesses are responding to that. Semester 2 next year will be relationship management, which is specifically marketing and communications. So looking at how businesses market to current and potential customers, what's an example of strong marketing, what's an example of marketing that lacks a coherent voice and coherent message. You'll obviously be creating a marketing campaign in semester 2 as part of the assessment, and we'll talk about assessment towards the end. So for both of these courses, we have pathways into business administration, business management, business ownership, independent contracting. So if you're specifically an accredited student who's looking to get a trade, being an independent contractor is one of those natural pathways where you're running your own business. Economic degrees, accounting, finance, aid, charities and not-for-profits, and economic development. So just a few potential pathways if you choose the commerce package and do the double major there. We also have legal studies. So legal studies, they're currently doing law, government and society, moving into international relations and the law in semester 2, which means that your semester 1 next year would be crime, justice and legal system, looking at criminal law specifically, and then in semester 2, looking at civil law and the resolution of disputes, in semester 2 of 2021. So plenty of pathways for law. I mean, there's the obvious one, which is a legal degree, or public policy is the other one. So helping to write policy, policy advice, policy advisors. And there are so many links with political science, international relations, and business studies that it makes it a good course to enhance your understanding of the others as well, because the law runs through all of our courses and is very popular. Global studies is my pet project. As I mentioned earlier to some of you, I was on the course writing panel for this new course that we're rolling out in 2021 across the ACT. It's broken up into 4 different semesters, as is every course, but we're starting off with global actors. So a global actor is anyone who's involved in international relations, anyone who's a major player. And so based off student interest, we'll choose actors to analyze across the semester and look at where they gain their power and influence, or why they don't have power and influence. We then move into semester 2 looking at global processes. So depending on student interest, we can look at trade, we can look at law, we can look at military disputes, we can look at sanctions. Whatever students are interested in, we can look at the global processes that help make that process, that help make the world function and ensure a degree of peace and security. Then in semester 3, global challenges is the key unit, looking at various challenges across the globe and how they're faced by different nations. Again, the pandemic is an obvious one that we looked at, that we're currently looking at in global studies, but also things like economic disputes, border disputes, for instance, Israel-Palestine. We've got the Syria conflict that's been going on. We've got the Arab Spring, which has happened in the Middle East and has continued ramifications. We have so many instances across the globe of fragile leaders or dictators that are holding onto power as well. So global challenges. And then we have the other side, which is your climate change and natural disasters, and overcoming those challenges. The last semester is about global opportunities. So we look at the problems in semester 1, and we look at the avenues for solutions in semester 2. So that's global opportunities. We look at human development. We look at the work in the not-for-profit sector for improving the lives of people across the world. We look at climate initiatives. We look at microfinancing. We look at all of these things that happen across the world to improve people's lives and what can be done by governments and individuals. So there are plenty of pathways: international relations, international law, journalism, economic development, aid work, public policy, diplomacy, and foreign affairs and trade. On Thursday next week, we actually have our friends from the American Embassy joining us for a talk about different pathways in global studies as well. So global studies, this is next year will be the 3rd year that we're running this course at JPC. And I've been the teacher for all 2 years, and obviously next year as well. Politics is a course that we offer, and depending on student numbers, we're very keen to run this. Not a lot of schools around the ACT run this or are able to get a class together. And naturally, there's a lot of synthesis between global studies, which we just talked about, and this unit. But this unit focuses more specifically on Australia and the Australian climate and how Australia engages with others and how Australia compares to others. In semester 1, it's power, politics, and political thought. So we look at the idea of progressive politics and conservative politics, how power is demonstrated in Australia, the influences that affect Australian democracy. And in semester 2, it's comparative politics, so comparing 2 democracies. So how does Australia and New Zealand, how do we compare as Commonwealth nations, or looking at the United States and Australia and how they compare both as democracies, but one that has obviously had its historical issues with Britain and therefore a different structure. In semester 3, we look at oligarchy and authoritarianism. Oligarchy is the idea of power being concentrated but in the hands of a few people, and authoritarianism, which is the dictatorships that happen around the world. So you look at Brazil, currently run by Bolsonaro, as a good example, or Syria and Bashar al-Assad, or you could look at North Korea, China, and more becoming authoritarian in its government and moving away from the democratic leanings that it had a couple of years ago even. And then finally, international relations. You'll notice in all of the SOSE units, there's an international relations component, because the SOSE units are not just about what's happening in Australia, it's about Australia and the rest of the world. And so there are pathways into political science, international relations, law degrees, public policy, diplomacy, aid work, and journalism So there's a very quick run through of our course offerings. I'm happy to answer questions in the chat. Obviously, if you want to have a longer conversation, we can do that now, or we can have a chat when you return. Or if you want to contact me through my email, I'm more than happy to answer questions. Or if your parents want to organize a time to sit down, I'm happy to organize a time to sit down with them or have a call on the phone. So if you have questions, I'm happy for you to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, if you're content, I'm happy for you to have a nice day. Which one would you recommend the most for a career in international relations? That's a great question. Global studies is the go-to for that, but I would encourage you to pair that with, if you're interested in international relations is more about the legal framework, then I'd encourage you to choose legal. If it's more about the political framework, politics and the law, if it's more about, so it really depends on what you want to, when you say international relations, what areas you want to focus in. Global studies is a must, but how you pair that is entirely up to you. You can do up to 3 SOSE subjects too, Brady, which is a great question, one I should have covered earlier. So, and to tend to the global studies. So global studies is one of the units that we offer. Just let Kyten in. So global studies looks at actors, which is key players in global politics around the world. Semester 2 is about processes, which is key ways that we manage conflict, or we manage economic crises, or we manage relationships across countries. Then we look at global challenges. So we could look at terrorism, we could look at rogue states, we could look at legal challenges, South China Sea challenges, military disputes, border disputes, and then we look at the opportunities in semester 4. So that's basically it's broken up into those 4 semesters, and obviously student interest drives the case studies that we choose. Jade's got a question about geography. What would geography fit into? We have tried to offer geography in the past, but its take-up hasn't been strong enough for us to really run it in a viable way. And a lot of schools are moving away from geography into global studies. But if you would like to look at the scientific factors, then earth and environmental science. But if you want to look at the responses to crises, then you could look at it from a business perspective, you could look at it from a legal perspective, you could look at it from a global studies perspective, you could look at it from a political perspective. It's up to you. So if it's more of that scientific basis, earth and environmental science is the natural one for you to flow into, and Miss Conlon is currently teaching that one at our school, so I'd encourage you to get in contact with her. But if you want to look at the responses to those climate, the political response, the economic response, the legal response, then that would depends on when you say geography. Geography is a very broad concept, so where your interests specifically lie. Kakan, you can choose 3. Essentially, you get to choose about 3 courses, and we'll talk more about that when it comes to package selection and about what you need to qualify for a tertiary package. But think about it as you get 3 choices. That's probably the easiest way to go. English is obviously a must. Maths is a must. And also RE is a must as well and I'd encourage you to stick with that anyway, because if you have writing and research skills, you're probably going to do very well in that subject. If you pick a subject and end up don't like it, that's fine. The best thing to do is in that 2-week window. So in year 11, week 1, week 2, you'll be given a unit outline of what the semester looks like, and then you can make a choice. The first 2 weeks is the best time to swap. Otherwise, you have to wait for the semesters to make your changes there. And then you are able to drop 1 subject between year 11 and year 12. So if you're happy to stick with the subject that you're not quite happy with for a year, drop it at the end of year 12, depending on how it affects your final score, or fit it in that 2-week window, or at the end of semester 1. It's up to you. Some really good questions, guys. And maths is, you are heavily advised to do maths as well, because maths will help you for the AST, as well as having, helping you with life. So my advice would be to stick with maths unless there's a very, very strong reason why you shouldn't do it. Any other questions that I haven't answered? I think I've covered pretty much everyone. Again, I'm happy to talk to individuals at a more detailed level, or if you want me to break down subjects show you what the subjects are currently doing or show you current assignments, then I'm happy to do that as well. When will we get more information about the people coming in from the American Embassy? So one thing about our school is we have a really good relationship with the American Embassy. They're actually going to do work with our seniors at the moment. They're doing work in the Global Studies course Thursday next week. They're actually talking to the Legal Studies and the History course as well. So that's only for seniors, unfortunately, but we have a really good relationship with them. We like to bring them in because they are keeping us in touch with experts in the field, and it's really good to get you interacting with people who are working in the SOSE field, whether it's diplomacy or whether it's in a specific policy area that's related to the subject. All right. Explain the difference between a major and a minor. That's a great question, Rebecca. So a major is a subject that you've done for 4 semesters, 2 years. And a minor is a subject that you've done for 1 or 2 semesters, okay? So if you do, for instance, global studies for just year 11, you can get a minor. If you do a major across both years, then you'll get a major in it. A double major is if you choose 2 courses that are linked. So for instance, if you choose modern history and history integrated, then you can get a double major. So that's 8 semesters, but you can get it if you have 6 or 7. So double majors for some only. Yes, double majors, there's very specific links between courses and that's not our rule, that's a BSSS rule. So the commerce double major and the history double major as well. So they're the 2 that we can offer. But again, you don't have to do both in a pair if you don't want to. You can, for instance, do business without doing economics, or you can do both. So you generally have about 3 choices. So how you spread that is entirely up to you. Would doing a double major count as 1 class? No, it would be 2 separate classes. So you'd do, you'd be sitting a business class and an economics class, or you'd be sitting a modern history class and a history integrated class as well. So it would count as 2 classes. And legal studies, unfortunately, we can only offer that as a major. So if you do it for year 11, that's a minor. If you do it for year 11 and 12, that's a major. And we'll talk more about the major and minors. Sometimes I think we overthink them. My main advice is to choose courses that interest you, because that's where you'll do the best that you can. If you're choosing courses just to get a major or just to get a minor or just to get a double major, your motivation to do well in the subject isn't as strong. So just choose 3 subjects that you think you can do the best in, that you're interested in, that you're motivated to do that in. Scaling. Scaling is a great question. And this links into Derek's question as well. So a couple of great questions. So there's a perception about scaling. The ACT works a little bit different to New South Wales. So some of you might know that in New South Wales, they all sit the same exam. All the modern history students across New South Wales sit the same exam. All the business students, or business studies as it's called over there, sit the same exam. All the legal studies students sit the same exam. And so there's an idea that scaling has an impact. Basically, it's how well you perform in the subject. So for instance, if some people argue that biology scales really well, but if you're bad at biology, it will not help you at all. So my advice is to do well in whichever subjects that you choose, and that's going to help your ATAR. In my time in the ACT, I've taught DUXers that have been involved in science. I've taught DUXers that have been DUX students, like top student, who've been involved in performing arts, and others who've been involved in SOSE subjects as well. It all depends on the subjects that you choose and doing well in those specific subjects. For instance, I'd be a terrible biology student. So me choosing biology, I don't think I'd get the best ATAR. But if I chose a history subject, one that I'm interested in, I'd get a better score. So the ATAR is calculated, Derek, based off, to follow up into your question, is what we call the Z score, which is the average score, how your score compares to the average. And so, So that kind of cancels that scaling question as well. So basically we look at the average and we rank the students in classes, and then the AST, the scaling test, compares that, and then that spits out an ATAR. What is the average ATAR score? So the average ATAR score to enter university is 60. That's the average. That's what we consider a university entrance score. Again, our DUCS last year was in the 99s. So with the school's median ATAR, you can Dr. Cleary calculates all of those results. We had students get in the 90s. We had students get in the 80s. We had students get in the 70s. So really, it depends on what you're capable of doing as well. If you're relying on a school to get you an ATAR, that's not the way to look at it. We can help you do the best that you can, but choosing a school will not magically give you a magical ATAR. All right, we're coming on to 305. If there are any other questions or questions that I haven't elaborated on, I'm happy to answer those as well. All right. Well, so if we're yes. So Brady's question is, if we're compared to others in our class, are we somewhat competing against them? It's more of in the ACT, the way the system works is you're actually a team, but yes, there is an element of competition. You always want to be in the higher end of the marking range. You always want to be above the average if you want the better ATAR. ATAR calculation is a very complex topic. I would need hours to explain it, every aspect to you, and I just don't have the time to do that at the moment. But to put it shortly, if you look at the average score of a class, how you compare against the average will create what we call a Z score. And then the Z score will be meshed up against the ASTs, and then the AST will spit out your ATAR based off all of those factors put together. So yes, there's an element of competition in that, absolutely, in senior studies, and that's the way the system's designed to operate. But it's also designed that if everyone does well, everyone can help out each other, especially when it comes to the AST. And so the AST is the leveler. And so if you've got a really talented class, a really talented group, everyone's ATAR rises, and as well. So there's positives. There's absolute positives, but I can see why you'd say the element of competition is there. All right. Oh. In a smaller group, so Tatender's asked, if you're in a smaller group, do you get scaled higher? For example, being third in the class is higher than a bigger school. So you've got to remember that when we talk about scaling groups, we have to put a certain amount of students together. So, you can't have a scaling group of 3 students. It doesn't make sense. So we combine subjects together to create a scaling group that are of comparable size, of comparable subjects. So that's really important to understand that scaling groups generally across the system, we try, there's certain thresholds for how many is involved in a scaling group. But the key advice is, as always, study hard in your subject, work hard on your assignments, make sure you understand everything in the class, and the rest of it will take care of itself. ATAR scores, once you've received your ATARs, your ATAR will translate across different states. So it's a tertiary admission ranking, which allows you to apply for universities across the country. But yes, the ACT calculation is a little bit different to how they calculate it in New South Wales, but they have to make sure it's comparable. And that's why we have the scaling test at the end for every student who wants an ATAR across every school. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, really appreciate you jumping on for this chat. Again, you know where to find me if you have more specific questions or want to talk about things in more depth and detail. I'm more than happy to do that. Obviously, you've got another week and a half in isolation currently. away from school. But when you return, I'm more than happy to have those conversations, because we don't need to pin you into certain subjects in the near future. We have plenty of time to do that, and plenty of time to have those conversations. So you're in subjects that we feel that you can excel in, and that you feel confident in selecting. So I'm going to end that one there. Have a wonderful day. Look forward to seeing you, and keep enjoying SOSE.